Thanks for the special lectern. Thank you for the introduction and thanks for being here. It's really exciting to be here as part of a very intellectual group of people who want to know more about the world and how it works. And now tonight I want to talk to you about cities, what they mean to you and what they mean to me. And throughout my entire presentation I want you to stop and think about how Perth as a city as a whole can do better. And now while cities were sometimes, and even still are, places of squalor, poverty and filth, throughout time they've also captured humans' imagination. From Constantinople to Dubbo, people have always flocked to them. Now, as of several years ago, for the first time in human history ever, more humans now live in urban areas or cities than in what we know as a country. That's the first time that's happened in human history. So that means the way we build our cities now is as important as ever. Now, Edward Glasser, in his new book, Triumph of the City, which I'm not promoting or trying to sell, argues that cities are humans' greatest invention. City dwellers are now richer, greener, and healthier than our country cousins, richer in cultural and economic terms. Our greatest invention ever. Now, hold that thought. Is what you see here our greatest invention? I see a shopping centre or two, a couple of schools, some roads, and a lot of terracotta and swimming pools. And this is where I grew up, Ocean Reef, or Shangri-La Ocean Reef as I like to call it. This is where I went to school, but there was never always something quite right, and I'm not talking about my sexuality. I was fascinated as a child being taken to the city, the hum, the glass, the lights. It was intoxicating. It was a complete antithesis of my suburban life. And I continued on in life not really thinking about it much, and I ended up having a traineeship at the biggest accounting firm in the world. However, when I was working at level 21 at QB1 in the city on St George's Terrace, instead of doing work, I found myself peering down into the city, watching the cranes swing and wondering, I wonder what they're building, and critiquing the streetscape works that were going on and getting really angry every single morning about that aquamarine and pink pedestrian bridge over Wellington Street to Marine Square, thinking, why doesn't somebody change the colour of that bridge? And so eventually I made the decision to throw a year of commerce studies down the drain, and I haven't really looked back since. And my new goal in life was to learn and understand how cities work and how to make them better. So university was going really well, and I was perfectly content and continuing to learn. Then in 2008, this proposal came along. It was the Perth waterfront proposal by our infamous former planning minister, Alana McTiernan, or Matt Daddy as I like to call her. And it really, really captured my imagination. It was something, really fired up something inside me. And bizarrely to me and many of my friends and university colleagues, there was a constant stream of people, including from within the city of Perth itself, which detested the idea of a new face of Perth. They were so afraid that if we did something to Perth, we'd somehow lose something about who we are. And while I have a complete inability to hold down a relationship, I think I know enough that even if you love something or someone, that thing can still change and you can still love it. So it's perfectly fine for Perth to change. So Perth does really well in the natural landscape department. We have the river, we have the ocean. But I think everyone in this room would really struggle to name a place for me, to me, that's truly urban in nature, that doesn't leverage off our natural assets. And that's what cities are all about. When people say, what do you think about Perth? We say the ocean. What place in Perth is truly urban in nature, our greatest human achievement? And basically Future Perth was born from this project. And we were initially a bunch of students from university and the Skyscraper City online forums, but we eventually snowballed, not in the Urban Dictionary sense, over time as people kept on rocking up to meetings. And so we created our incorporated organisation, including an obligatory photo of myself and Kings Park looking into the distance. And just to give you a very quick idea of what Future Perth gets up to, we do submissions on major projects, such as the Northbridge Link Perth Waterfront project, do presentations, such as the one I'm doing right now, meet local politicians, and we also get to do lots of fun stuff. You can see from the bottom photo, we got to do a tour of Alan Bond's old apartment at the top of the Bank West Tower. And it was really fascinating to think just what went on in the spa and the sauna up there. And also very quickly, before I move on to my next project, we categorise the sort of things that we do into 4 major categories. Following me from the top, major projects, the built environment, governance, and movement. And basically we take an outsider's approach to planning, an approach where we consider change as healthy and where existing controls and methods should be questioned. Now, this leads us to our next project. It's basically an imagination exercise. I hope you all have an imagination. And it's probably fair to say that everyone in this room loves Perth a little bit, maybe not when we get back from Europe, but we do. And so I'm asking you all in this room, what would you like to change about Perth as your city, as your home? And what are the little things that you would like to change? Just like that aquamarine and pink bridge that I really, really despise. Now, just to give you an idea of the sort of organisations that are involved in the planning of this city at the moment, and I had to cut this in half thanks to Jay. Some of the organisations involved in planning for the city include the City of Perth, the Department of Planning, the WA Planning Commission, Main Roads, the Public Transport Authority, Department of Treasury and Finance, Building Management and Works, the East Perth Redevelopment Authority, Landcorp, and at least 12 more that I listed. So I think you get the point. So who decides to do something about that aquamarine paint? Who's the person who initiates the idea? Do we rely on Colin Barnett and Lisa Scafidi to decide what to do next all the time? No, we don't. So Future Perth's new project is called Why Not? Why Not? So it's basically a grassroots urban planning movement that will seek to change our city, and what we want to do is feed our ideas into the myriad of agencies that are involved in governing our city. So if you could change our city, what would you do? Wouldn't it be great if we could have an annual picnic on the Horseshoe Bridge just like Sydney does every year? Why don't we have designated silent carriages on the train unless you're being stabbed? Why doesn't RSPCA set up an animal shelter in the city so people can take a dog for a walk during lunchtime? And just before I go on to the next slide, when we're talking about the city, it's quite easy to say, oh no, don't copy Melbourne or something, but every city is inherently unique, so it's perfectly fine to import ideas from other cities, I think. Now, why don't we glam up the interchanges in inner-city Perth? Why don't we recognise that the hundreds and thousands of motorists that use these roads every single day would like to look at something other than concrete? I think when we build our own home where we live, we don't build it in a purely utilitarian manner. I guess if we all lived in a giant concrete cube, we'd have a lot more money, but we'd be a lot less happy. So we need to think of our city, Perth, as our home. So if you think of all the cities you travel when you go to Europe and you come back to Perth, and you think of these places in Rome and London, these places which they built hundreds of years ago, even thousands of years ago, and people still flock and marvel at them. What are we creating in Perth that will stand the test of time? Did you know that if you have a massive blank wall in the city of Perth, it's basically a near certainty. If you wanted to put a billboard up, it would be rejected. It's policy. It's not allowed. Instead of a blank wall. It seems a bit crazy to Future Perth. So this is what happens when you try and protect something. You actually end up killing it or making it really, really boring. I can think of a dozen walls in the city that would look fantastic with a giant iPod silhouette or a really big androgynous Burberry model. Perhaps instead of judging if a rule has merit or tinkering with that rule, why should we even have that rule at all? So, overall, cities are these amazing, organic, living, ever-changing things, and Perth is one of those places as well, and change is healthy. So you've heard some of the ideas that Future Perth would like to implement in our city, and we'd love to hear some of yours. Thank you.